through Jewish tradition, we know that by the time you got to Jesus' day, not only did you eat the flesh of the lamb and have unleavened bread, but you had multiple cups of wine that were part of the Passover liturgy. And so when you turn to, for example, Luke chapter 22 and the description of the Last Supper, it's one of the 3 descriptions of the Last Supper in the Bible, we find out that at the Last Supper, it says that Jesus took, quote, the cup after supper, saying, "This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." And we just saw Paul refer to the Eucharistic cup as the cup of blessing. Well, all of that imagery is coming not from Jewish scripture, but from Jewish tradition.
Right.
Because we know that at the time of Christ, the Jewish Passover was celebrated with 4 cups of wine. And so when Christ consecrates the cup after supper, that was called the cup of blessing in ancient Jewish tradition. And actually, to this day, if you participate in a Jewish Seder, the 3rd cup of wine is called the cup of blessing.
Wow.
The cup of blessing. And that's the one that Jesus consecrates, and St. Paul knows it. And that's why he refers to it as the Eucharistic cup. So these ancient Jewish traditions help explain things in the Bible that otherwise wouldn't make a lot of sense to us. They're kind of like light on the scriptures, helping us to interpret it correctly and in its context.
You mentioned these 4 cups. Can we talk about the 4 cups for a minute?
As I said, at the time of Jesus, it was considered binding tradition that at every Jewish Passover, you would celebrate with at least 4 cups of wine. And we see those mentioned in the accounts of the Last Supper. And what's odd, though, is while those multiple cups are present at the Last Supper, as we've just seen in Luke 22, Jesus does something strange when it comes to the wine. First, he identifies it as his blood. That would have been unusual. That's not normal.
Yeah.
That's not what you would do at a normal Passover, to say, "This is my blood, now drink of it." But then also, too, David Dalby, who was a great Jewish scholar of the New Testament, writing back in the 50s, noticed that Jesus did something else that was strange. He didn't seem to drink the final cup of the Passover meal. As David Dalby pointed out, if you look at the Gospel of Matthew and Mark, it says that Jesus vowed, "I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine," which would be wine, "until the kingdom comes." And then the Gospels say, "And he and the disciples sang a hymn, and they went out for the night." Now, as this Jewish scholar pointed out, from a Jewish perspective, it looks like Jesus didn't finish the Passover, because every Jew would have known that after you sang the hymn, which were these Passover psalms, Psalms 113 to 118, you had to drink the 4th and final cup of wine. That was how you completed the Passover liturgy. It would kind of be like a priest today maybe consecrating the bread and wine at the Eucharist and then just walking out. The Catholics don't have to know much to say, "Hey, Father, you're not quite done yet, right? I mean, you haven't finished the liturgy." And so when Jesus and the disciples leave the upper room after singing the hymn, Dalby pointed out that it seems as if Jesus left the Passover incomplete. And this is strengthened by the fact that when he gets to Gethsemane, what does he start to pray about? He doesn't say, "Father, don't let me be crucified." He doesn't say, "Father, don't let me be executed." He says, "Father, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." And then again he prays, "Father, this cannot pass unless I drink it. Thy will be done." And he prays that prayer 3 times in Matthew 26.
Which is repetition.
It's repetition too. Catholics sometimes...
Pray the rosary, it's repetition.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes we get criticized for saying things over and over again. Well, Jesus, in Matthew 26, it says he said it saying the same words 3 times.
Wow.
So why is he praying about drinking a cup? Is that how you would describe getting crucified? It's a bit odd, isn't it? But it makes total sense if he sees his death as the completion of the Passover. If what he's doing is he's uniting his actions at the Last Supper to his sacrifice on Calvary.
Wow.
And see, sure enough, this is confirmed if you follow along down the road to the cross. On the way to the cross in Matthew's Gospel, it tells us that the Romans tried to give him some wine mixed with gall to drink. And as soon as they touched it to his mouth, what did he do? He spit it out because he had vowed not to drink of the wine again till the coming of the kingdom. But then we get to John's Gospel, chapter 19, at the very end of his life, when Jesus is hanging on the cross after he's given Mary to John to be his mother and given John to Mary as a son, he then cries out, "I thirst." And the soldiers stood there. They had a bowl of common wine because it was a custom, and Jesus would have known this, to give wine to the dying. It was a Jewish custom to give wine to the dying. As the same way we kind of give a man who's executed today a last meal, that was the idea. And so at the very end of his life, he says, I thirst. And the soldier gives him the wine, touches it to his lips, and it says, as soon as he drank the wine, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and he gave up his spirit. That's John 19:25-26. So why does Jesus vow not to drink the wine in the upper room, refuse the wine on the way to the cross, and then turn around on Calvary and request the wine and then say it is finished? What is finished? What is the it he's talking about?
It's the Passover.
It's the Passover.
So what you're saying is the Passover did not end, like most readers, when I would read it before, I would think, well, the Passover ended and he went out to the agony. No, the Passover was continuing.
That's right.
All the way throughout.
All the way throughout. See, because what Jesus is doing is he's uniting the liturgy of the Last Supper to the liturgy of Calvary. He calls them all his 1 hour. He's uniting his self-offering under the form of bread and wine to his self-offering on Calvary.